So you know what One Piece is amazing at? Victories. Catharsis. The satisfaction of seeing villains get punched into next week. Oda takes us through the deepest tragedies just to make the climaxes hit harder, and then he fills them with thematic weight that goes beyond just the bad guys getting beaten. And half the reason they're so good is, of course, the art. Some of the most iconic shots in manga come from One Piece villains getting beaten. And with chapter 1121, we might have just gotten another. So let's dig into the paneling that built up this victory and carried us through it. The action starts with Luffy winding up a punch. Normally, the next panel would show the space in front of him that his punch goes through, or maybe a close-up before it. But instead, we pull back, zooming out and framing Bonnie behind Luffy. Because Luffy was facing right, but the eye and camera go left, this gives the feeling of slowing down, taking a pause. The shot composition is showing us how Luffy is thinking, noticing Bonnie's feelings, and then changing his approach based off of them. As we turn to the next page, Saturn's horns lead us up to then follow the attack down. The eye follows the same motion as the attack, down to getting interrupted on its path by Luffy's fist, which stands out nicely thanks to the haki shading. The physical layout here matches the dynamic of the fight on a conceptual level. Saturn aggressing on Bonnie, while Luffy is on the side making sure Bonnie gets the opportunity to attack. That describes both how the characters feel and what they're physically doing. This kind of integration always seems simple, but takes a lot of skill and effort to set up so cleanly. As Saturn attacks, the eye starts from him and goes toward Bonnie. But as we go diagonally into the next panel, that's reversed, Bonnie before Saturn, showing she's getting ready to act. Saturn is, of course, still trying. I feel like I shouldn't have to explain why this shot of his claws closing in on Bonnie looks awesome. It's a great expression of how Bonnie is up against a threat so vast it can trap and surround her, using the shape language of sharpness to convey danger. It's also a motif that's going to come back in a few pages, so put a pin in that. The panel is defined by Saturn and doesn't include Luffy, so when the next panel is a close-up of Luffy, it serves as an interruption. Saturn thinks he can ignore Luffy, and Luffy says no, I'm still here, making himself impossible to ignore. As the eye goes down, its path matches how Luffy knocks the claws aside. And after that, the close-ups not only put focus on how the characters feel, but transition us into Bonnie's flashbacks. There's a lot going on throughout this page, but it's structured such that it's okay for your eyes to jump around. Bonnie's statements are all important for understanding her emotional state, but seeing that she's readying an attack doesn't spoil any of the emotions that brought her there. It's all part of the same overall picture. You can enter the action panel from the top left and follow Luffy and Bonnie towards Saturn, or you can enter from the right and follow the motion of her pulling her fist back. What to say about this panel itself? The poses are perfectly designed and spaced so both characters are clearly visible. The shading helps with that and makes it feel like Luffy is a ghostly apparition, being used to represent how Bonnie is channeling his spirit here. It is using that artistic trope, it's just also true at the same time that Luffy is physically there. The shading and Luffy being behind Bonnie convey that he's not trying to take focus here, that he is supporting her. Her fist is in the center, the one emphasized by the circles in the composition, while his fists are secondary. The central circle is off-center to give a feeling of imbalance that can be resolved through her fist going to the right, which happens to be where Saturn's panel is. The fist feels like it's going to come toward us. Look at how the smallest cloud circle is behind Luffy, while the next two are in front of him, and how Bonnie's hand reaches out in front of Saturn's panel. It all gives a sense of three-dimensional space the attack is coming through. Honestly, this panel is so full of clever techniques that I'm not even sure I've covered everything. Like, I think there's a triangular composition here too. What does that convey? I'm not sure. So let me know in the comments anything you've noticed about this panel. And the same goes for the one on the next page. This one is a reversal of the imagery we got when Saturn tried to attack Bonnie. His attacks didn't reach her, but Luffy's fists reach him, giving him what he deserves, making it just a little more satisfying. The two halves of this page are basically two different plot threads, so again, seeing the action doesn't spoil what's on the right. Oda handles that by making it so whichever panel row you're coming from, your eye will go straight into one of Luffy's arms, leading you toward the center, giving your eye the same experience of converging towards Saturn's face that all the fists have. And even though Bonnie's fist is going right, the eye going up with Luffy's fist makes it roughly align as they're all going up towards Saturn. It would be really easy for this panel to be a mess of punches. Oda uses a radial composition to give it a sense of order. Its punch is going from point A to point B, not in every which direction. Behind the radial composition, there's more circles, which put focus on the central circle that is Bonnie's fist. All of Luffy's punches feel like they're framing Bonnie in the center, rather than distracting from it, which again matches the concept of how Luffy is supporting her. When Bonnie was surrounded by Saturn's limbs, they were sharp, pointed towards her in offense, while Luffy's fists are all surrounding Bonnie in a safe, more comforting way as he's supporting her. And this ties into what's so great about One Piece's victories. Sure, it's brave heroes defeating evil villains, not morally gray conflicts where you have to think about who's right. But in spite of what the more edgy manga fans would say, moral grayness is not the only way to explore an interesting theme. This fight isn't about who's right, but about Bonnie starting to become the person she wanted to believe in, with Luffy's support. And it shows that theme through the way Bonnie and Luffy defeat Saturn, and the composition of the page where it happens. So how does this rank among all the villain defeats in One Piece? After all, I hyped it up at the start, didn't I? Well, it's not actually that special for one, in spite of everything I just said about how cool it is. There are simply too many iconic ones in the series. The standard is set so high, you draw pages as cool as this that are still, somehow, unremarkable in the context of what One Piece is capable of. And this isn't even Saturn's final defeat, but it sure makes me excited for what we'll get in the final conflict against the world government, and the battle for the One Piece. If you want to see my thoughts on that final page, subscribe to the Patreon or become a channel member to get access to my full chapter paneling analysis. Other than that, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and have a great day.